In Act 2 of A Raisin in the Sun, we see Beneatha and George getting ready for their date. And Beneatha takes off this headdress and reveals that her hair is now close cropped and unstraightened. And Ruth and George kind of look at her and they want to know what did you do to yourself, right? George says, what have you done to your head? I mean your hair. And she says, nothing except cut it off. And Beneatha is saying, well, look, if you're ashamed of your heritage, and then she says, I hate assimilationist Negroes. And Ruth says, well, somebody please tell me what whoever means. And George says, oh, it's just a college girl's way of calling people Uncle Toms. But that isn't what it means at all. Well, what does it mean? And Beneatha says, look, it means someone who is willing to give up his own culture and submerge himself completely in the dominant, and in this case, oppressive culture. Now, when I read that line, I'm reminded of a passage in the autobiography of Malcolm X. And in this autobiography, he's telling a story about a time in which he was attempting to conk his hair. And the term conk is used even in this play. And it refers to a process that I'm not sure the exact details, but it's sort of a process of straightening the hair. And apparently you put product into your hair. I'm guessing it burns the scalp as it's left in. And the longer you can leave the conk in, the straighter the hair, the better your results, so to speak, right? And so Malcolm X is describing a moment when he's got this in his hair. His head is burning. It's on fire. His head's on fire. And he's trying to hold on and wait. And he can't take it anymore. And it's time he got to go rinse out his hair. And if I recall the story correctly, the water had been turned off, I guess maybe for not paying the water bill. There's no water in the house. So the only water he can find is the water in the toilet. So he has to wash out the conch in his hair to in the toilet. And the idea is that this is kind of about as a degrading as about as low moment as you can imagine, shoving your head into a toilet, he said, in order to fit some standard of beauty from the dominant culture. So he said, in a sense, you could say trying to look like more like the white celebrities that you see in the films up on the big screen or on the television screen. There's a sort of a dominant view from the dominant culture of what does it mean to be beautiful. And he said, I was degrading myself. I'm burning my head and shoving it into a toilet, trying to fit this dominant culture. And he said, I vowed that I would no longer do that to myself. And so I thought about that when I'm reading this play, when I read this play, because Beneatha is saying, look, she's listened to Asagai, and he said, you don't need to mutilate yourself. And she was really, you don't need to try to change the way you look. You need to embrace and appreciate your natural beauty. It's part of this Black is Beautiful movement that we need to embrace and accept and even celebrate our own culture and not try to be something that we're not. So Beneatha sort of stands up and passes on to George some of these ideas, of course, that she probably got from Asagai. And she starts talking about her heritage, and George kind of has sort of a derogatory response. Oh my gosh, you're going to go on about all these great African empires and all this stuff. And he says, look, you keep using that word heritage. Let's face it, baby, your heritage is nothing but a bunch of raggedy ass spirituals and some grass huts. And so this makes me think also of Everyday Use with Dee and her sister Maggie, where you kind of skip the heritage of slavery and indentured servants. And this is a family history that Lena Younger talks about in the play. And we come from 5 generations of slaves and sharecroppers, and then our family moved out of the South and into the Midwest here in Chicago. And that's our immediate heritage, right? But beyond that heritage, there's an African heritage as well. And so George is like, look, That's her heritage, so deal with it. And Beneatha is very angry about that. Now, in this scene comes Walter, who is completely drunk. And you can tell pretty much right away that Walter is envious of George. He kind of wishes that he could have the type of money and opportunities that George has. And George, like Beneatha, they are students in college. And Walter, of course, has never gone to college. And that's part of the reason why he's so upset is he's been working, he and Ruth have been working so hard to help Beneatha go to college. So he comes in, he looks at the fine clothes of George. He looks at his tweed sports jacket, cashmere V-neck sweater, soft eyelet shirt and tie, soft slacks, finished off with white buckskin shoes. And it's weird. In some ways, he's like trying to see if he could talk to Walter wants to talk to George's father about some business ideas. But at the same time, he's insulting George. So, and part of it's because he's so drunk, he's not thinking straight. So he says, "Hey, how's your old man making out? I understand you all going to buy that big hotel on the drive." And he's trying to just talk big here. Shrewd move. Your old man is all right, man. I mean, he knows how to operate. I mean, he thinks big. I'd like to talk to him. Listen, man, I got some plans that could turn the city upside down. I mean, think like he does. Big. Invest big, gamble big, hell, lose big if you have to. You know what I mean? And so look, he's just talking the talk. He's all talk here. And it's so funny. All he has is an idea to own a liquor store, right? But he's acting like he's some tycoon, some mover and shaker, right? Some titan of business and industry. He says, "Me and you ought to sit down and talk sometimes, man. I got some ideas." But see, George is not having any of it. He notice his reaction is he's completely bored. And he says, yeah. Sometimes we'll have to do that. Yeah, we'll do that, Walter. And Walter can tell right off that he's being disrespected and he's kind of being blown off here. And so Walter's feelings are hurt. And so he starts to attack. And he says, "I see you all the time with the books tucked under your arms, going to your classes. And for what? What the hell are you learning over there, filling up your heads with sociology and psychology? Are they teaching you how to be a man, how to take over and run the world? No." And so you get a sense of what his idea here of what does it mean to be a man? He feels that he wants to have power. He wants to be able to take over and run the world. So in this, he kind of reminds me a lot of Farrington from Counterparts, right? Is that he feels that he wants to be some big authority figure, somebody with power, somebody that people look up to. And even Eric in Uncle Rock, get a sense of a man of being somebody who has money and a lot of power and prestige. And yet, remember, Eric looked at Rock and saw that he started to reevaluate what does it mean to be a man. And so now when I compare Walter to those other stories, I see here Walter also has an idea that to be a man means to be powerful and have a lot of money and to be able to take over and run the world. And so George responds, "You're all whacked up with bitterness, man." And I like Walter's response. He says, "Bitter? Man, I'm a volcano." Bitter. And so there, I want you to think about that poem again, that poem Harlem by Langston Hughes, where he talks about what happens to a dream deferred. And at the end of the poem, we had that rhetorical question, or does it explode? You see, George's dreams keep getting deferred and delayed and put off. He keeps getting denied. Even when he goes to George, he gets like a door slammed in his face. And so at some point, he's going to have enough. It's going to boil over. It's going to erupt like a volcano. It's going to explode. And he says, "Here I am, a giant surrounded by ants, ants who can't even understand what it is the giant is talking about." So he's talking about so much about being a giant that on the way out, as George leaves with his date with Beneatha, he looks over to Walter and says, "Good night, Prometheus." And it's a good insult here because Walter's been talking about being this big giant and having big plans and big dreams and wanting to run the world. And I advise you to look up the legend or myth of Prometheus and see what it is and to see how it applies to Walter. And so you get the sense in this myth of someone who's like striving for greatness, right? Some giant striving, and he calls him Prometheus on the way out the door. And Walter's response is funny. He's like, "Who's Prometheus?" See, there, they get to the point where they can't insult you man to man. They got to go talk about something ain't nobody never heard of. Is Prometheus. I bet there ain't even no such thing. I bet the simple-minded clown, right? So he says you can't even insult like a man. It's got to go bring up some college reference to Prometheus or something. Okay. So that's a very revealing scene between Beneatha and Walter. I'm sorry, Beneatha and George, and then between Walter and George. Now the follow-up to this is Walter has kind of gone off on George, and Ruth was embarrassed, but she starts to feel some compassion for him. She realizes that he's upset. And so what I like is there's a very nice scene that we realize that Ruth and Walter really do love each other, that they love each other, but you get the sense that their environment, their surroundings, all the outside external conditions of life have been kind of wearing them down and causing friction and conflict. So she says, look, life doesn't have to be like this. Sometimes people can do things so that things are better. And she says, remember how we used to talk about going to live in a house? And she starts to talk about their dreams. And in doing so, she echoes the conversation that Mama had said about where Mama and Walter Sr. had all kinds of plans, had only planned to stay in this apartment for a year, and had been stuck there ever since, working and toiling away. And their dream just kind of faded away. And now Ruth's saying, look, we're now repeating the same story. We're stuck in this apartment and our dream is slipping away from us. And they start to embrace and kiss. And of course, Mama shows up and kind of interrupts them. All right. But I just want to point that out to show you that this is a husband and wife who do very much love each other, but they're sort of being worn down and beaten up by life. And at this moment, Mama reveals that she has gone ahead and put a down payment on a house. And she's telling Travis, someday this house will be yours. And we see that Ruth is extremely happy about this. She says, I'm glad. And, she tells her husband, I wish you would just be glad with me too. And Mama describes it as a 3-bedroom house. She says, look, me and Beneatha will share a room. You and Ruth, you get your own room. Travis will have his own room. And if the new baby is a boy, he can live in there with Travis with like bunk beds. And there's a yard. We can have a garden and a nice little basement. And so everything, not little, a nice big basement, she says. And so she says, look, it's not a castle or anything, but it's a nice house. And she said something very important, Walter Lee, it makes a difference in a man when he can walk on floors that belong to him. See, so here's Walter who's he's longing for some type of respect, some type of dignity. And she says, instead of going into your little crappy apartment that you're renting, and you've got a bathroom that you have to share with other families out in the hallway, there's something about having a key and opening the door into your own house and walking on floors that belong to you. There's something about that makes a difference in a man. But then she reveals the address of the house, 406 Clybourne Street, Clybourne Park, and the family all kind of stop and they think, wait a minute, there are no Black families living in Clybourne Park. You went and bought a house in an all-white neighborhood? What's up with that? And she says, look, I'm just trying to find the nicest place for the least amount of money. And if you go to, she said, I'd go to try to buy a house in a black neighborhood somewhere, and the houses were almost like twice as much money. So I did the best that I could. And of course, Ruth doesn't really care. She says here, look at, hallelujah and goodbye misery. I don't never want to see your ugly face again. And she puts her hand on her abdomen, thinks about the baby on the way. And so she says, for the first time, she felt this baby, this life within her, pulsing with happiness and not just despair. And here's another reference to sunlight. Is there a lot of light out there, a lot of sunlight? And she says, yes, there's a whole lot of sunlight. So what she means by there is that it's an atmosphere in which the family can grow and thrive. Instead of that weak light that potted plant sits in that window of the kitchen trying to reach out and get some of that weak light of the south side of Chicago. Out here, she said, in the suburbs or out in the rural areas, we'll get out there and there'll be an environment where we can grow, we can thrive, right? And Mama tries to smooth things over with Walter, says, I hope you understand what I did and why I did it. I just couldn't stand by and watch our family fall apart like this. When something gets this bad, you just got to do something big and push out and do something bigger. So I hope you understand. But she doesn't get any understanding from Walter Lee. He is completely crushed. And he says, so you butchered up a dream of mine. You who always was talking about your children's dreams. You keep saying that you and my dad did everything that you could to sacrifice to help our dreams come true. You had an opportunity to make my dream come true, and yet you butchered it. And so Walter is completely upset. He feels like his dream is over. Now we have an interesting scene with the neighbor shows up, Miss Johnson. And I want to kind of mention Miss Johnson and another character, Willie Harris. And to show you that Walter feels and the Youngers feel like they're striving to reach the American dream. And there's all kinds of external circumstances, social and economic circumstances that are preventing them or making it difficult for them to reach their dreams. And of course, racism is one of those forces, and other situations that are in the way. And yet, you'd think that in such a situation where there's so many obstacles that the family's striving to overcome, that they would get allies, friends and allies from their own community that would help them and support them and lift them up and encourage them. And instead of lifting up the Youngers and encouraging them and rooting for them and saying, look, I want to see success. No, Miss Johnson comes over, right? Another African American. You'd think she'd be happy for the Youngers moving out to a great neighborhood and starting a new life. But no, maybe it's because she's in a sense envious. She wishes that maybe that it was happening to her, but she needs to feel better about herself by putting down and bringing the Youngers down. So instead of coming over here to encourage them, she kind of comes in and pretends to be nice, but drops a bunch of insults. Now, I also want to talk about Willie Harris. He's going to come up later. Willie Harris is supposed to be the friend, an ally of Walter, somebody that Walter can trust. They are supposed to be working together to pursue their dreams. And yet, instead of supporting Walter, Willie just attacks him and completely tears him down. So Willie Harris and Miss Johnson are both bringing the Youngers down when we would expect them to try to work to help lift them up. And so this is a commentary that I think the playwright is making, right? Lawrence Hansberry is saying about that, you expect there to be support from within the community. You expect getting resistance, you expect attacks from outside the community, but you don't expect it to come from within your own community. Okay. So she says, Miss Johnson, hey, do you hear about black families, right, who go into white neighborhoods to live and then they get attacked? They're victims of vandalism. Look, there was a bomb that went off out there. And so she kind of just, in a sense, scares the family. And you wonder, like, what's her reason for bringing this up? She's not saying, I'm genuinely concerned about your safety. No, she's just trying to say, hey, you're going to go out there. You think you're so great, going to head into a white neighborhood. Well, they're going to basically bomb you. And Mama can realize, she realizes that Miss Johnson's talking a lot of trash here. And so she says in this conversation, look, my husband always said that being any kind of servant wasn't a fit thing for a man to have to be. He always said a man's hands was made to make things or to turn the earth with, not to drive nobody's cars for him or carry the slop jars. And my boy is just like him. He was not meant to wait on nobody. So you get a good glimpse here into this pride of what does it mean to be a man? And Walter Sr. says, look, it's not a manly job to be a servant, to run around and say, yes, sir, no, sir. And I thought a lot about Farrington in this scene, right? From Counterparts, where the point was that he seemed like he was a man out of place in that office. He was a very large, strong man, big hands, somebody that should be working on a ship or out on a farm, doing construction, doing some outdoor job requiring a great amount of strength, physical strength. And yet he's crammed up in a little cubicle in an office doing paperwork. And something, that anger, think about that fury, that anger, that seething inside Farrington. And then he doesn't feel like he's respected at work. He's not respected at the pub. He wants to come home and be respected at home. And when he finds that he's not, he just loses it and hits his son. And that same type of anger and fury you see building up inside of Walter. And she says, look, he's not meant, a man is not meant to wait on anybody. And Miss Johnson says, well, you sure are one proud acting bunch of colored folks. See, so she calls them proud, right? You all think you're so great. You think you're so much better than everybody else. Right? There's a great novel that I teach in children's literature class called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And the main family in that book is the Logan family, and they have a great amount of a sense of dignity, a sense of pride, a very strong knit family, very strong family. And there are some members of their Black community that criticize them and work against them and say, look, you guys, you Logans think you're so great. You think you're so much better than everybody else. And you get that same kind of reaction here from Miss Johnson. She's trying to like tear them down and break them down to feel better about herself. All right. Then we get another piece of information. Mrs. Arnold calls and we find out that Walter has not shown up for work for 3 days. So when his mom basically put money down on that house, it killed off his dream and he's just given up. He hasn't even gone into work. So if you don't go into work tomorrow, basically you're out of a job. And Walter's like, I don't care. I quit. I don't even want to go to that stupid job anymore. So what have you been doing? It's Friday. What have you been doing the last 3 days? He says, well, Wednesday I borrowed Willie Harris's car and I just drove around past South Chicago. Then the next day I got his car again. I drove out the other direction up towards Wisconsin, looked at all these farms. Today I just walked around. I didn't have a car, so I just walked around. And every night I just basically end up at the Green Hat, like this music club, drinking and listening to music. And Mama listens to him saying all this, and she starts to realize that she's hurt him. And she says, look, you know what? I have to apologize. I know I've been wrong. I realize that I've been doing to you what the rest of the world has been doing to you. So really, there's no money, a house, no matter, there's no dream that's worth it if it means that I'm going to destroy my own boy. So here's my new plan. Look, I've already put the $3,500 down on the house. Okay, that's mine. I want you to put $3,000. I'm going to give you this money, the leftover $6,500. Put $3,000 in a savings account for Beneatha, and that will be her money for her schooling. And you can have the other $3,500. Put it in an account, and from now on, all the money that goes in and out of that account is for you to decide. And here it comes an idea here of what does it mean to be a man. She realizes that Walter needs to feel respected. He needs to have some type of responsibility, some type of authority. So she realizes her son needs that. And so she says, I want you to be the head of this family from now on, like you're supposed to be. Look, your father, Walter Sr., is dead. I want you to take over, and you can take his place and be the head of the household. And Walter, this really has a strong effect on Walter. He feels like he's finally gotten somebody's finally listened to him. He's finally got the respect that he's been looking for, a sense of authority, and he's sort of transformed. He's in a very positive mood, and he feels very encouraged, and he wants to talk to his son. And he says, look, son, I want to talk to you about the future. I want you to, what does it mean to be a man? When you grow up, what do you want to be? And the son says, a bus driver. And Walter's like, man, that ain't nothing to want to be. What, a bus driver? I mean, that's okay to fall back on as a job, but I don't know anybody who ever dreams of being a bus driver. You dream of being an astronaut or a famous sports hero or something, nobody dreams about being a bus driver. And Travis says, why not? He goes, well, because it ain't big enough. I want you to think big, dream big. And so you get the sense that this is the kind of the same conversation that Walter Sr. probably had with Walter Jr. And so the one man, Walter Sr., has passed the dreams on to the son, Walter Jr., and now he's passing those dreams on to the third generation with Travis. And he says, look, Travis, I'm gonna make this big business transaction, and it's gonna change our lives. And it's a very nice scene where he goes this big long dream about what his life is going to be like when he finally has respect, when he finally has a lot of money, when he's finally able to provide everything for his family that he wants to provide them. And he says, look, in 10 years from now, when we have all this money and everything's great, you're going to be 17, ready to go off to college. You just come to me and you're going to say, and you say, where do you want to go to college? And wherever it is that you want to go, then you're going to go. And I say, what do you want to be? And whatever you want to be, you'll be it. You just name it, son, he says, and I hand you the world. So you can see a father's dream here, a person that wants to be a provider for his family. He wants to have all this stuff so that he can give it to his son. Now, the irony is that if he just gave everything to Travis, Travis would probably end up being a big spoiled brat, who takes everything for granted. But whether or not you can give something to your children is not always the same as you should give it to your children. You shouldn't always just give everything, right? The point, though, is that Walter wants to be in the position where he can provide his family with what he feels they deserve, right? He would like to have the opportunity to spoil his kids, all right? So there's a lot of hope at the end of this scene too, all right? Now, scene 3 is mainly the focus is just on one interaction, right? Where a man shows up named Karl Lindner. So Act 2, Scene 3 is sort of the Karl Lindner scene. And he says that he's a representative of the Clybourne Park Improvement Association. And he's representing the neighborhood that the youngers are moving into. And Mama's not here in this scene. It's Walter and Ruth and Beneatha. And at first, Mr. Lindner seems like he's here for a friendly reason. He says, look, I was elected to come here and talk to you friendly like, the way people should talk to each other, and see if we couldn't find some way to work this thing out. The whole business is a matter of caring about the other fellow. Anybody can see that you are a nice family. And it's the way he starts talking, something starts to seem a little bit off. And they realize here that what he's saying is, look, I'm not trying to be, he said, I'm not racist, I'm not prejudiced. I just think black families should live in black communities and white families should be living in white communities. And so he's arguing here for a type of apartheid like South Africa, kind of a separate but equal. Hey, no hard feelings. I'm not going to put you down. I'm not a racist. I just think that you should stay on your side of the town and we'll stay on our side of the town. And in fact, this is so important that I've been authorized to bribe you or pay you off. So I'll give you $3,500 back, and then I'll give you more money. Like maybe I'll give you an extra $3,500. I don't know. It doesn't say exactly the amount, I don't believe. But he says, look, we'll pay you a lot of money for you just to agree to go live somewhere else. So he says, well, whether it's right or wrong, a man has the right to live in a neighborhood and to have that neighborhood a certain kind of way, right? And so he's trying to sound nice and fair, but it's just coming across, right, just completely prejudiced and racist. So he says, I'm prepared to pay you a lot of money to basically go somewhere else. And Walter is so pissed off, he just tells him, look, get out of my house, man. And Lindner has a parting shot. He goes, what do you think you're doing? Like, well, what are you gonna gain by moving into a neighborhood where nobody wants you? Why would you want to move into a neighborhood where everybody hates you? You really want to go live with a bunch of racists? And Walter just says, look, get out. I'm done. Right? And they don't really tell the truth to Mama. They kind of they try to act like, oh no, he was here to be nice, but they're so sarcastic about it that Mama picks up and says, wait a minute, what was going on? What did he do? Did he threaten us? And I love this line by Beneatha. She says, oh Mama, they don't do it like that anymore. He talked brotherhood. He said everybody ought to learn how to sit down and hate each other with good Christian fellowship. So they start laughing, talking about, well, screw them. We're going to get ready and go anyway. And it's funny that Mama is getting her plant fixed up and ready to take the plant with her. And Beneatha's like, why do you want to take that raggedy looking old plant to the new house, right? And Mama says, because it expresses me. So again, notice again, all of the references to the plant. And when you read literature and something keeps getting repeated, you see something show up over and over again, a little light bulb should go off and you say, well, this must be important. Let me think about it and make some sense of it, okay? Another nice little scene I just want to point out is that as they get ready to move to this new house, they got together and they got Mama a gift and they gave her a brand new sparkling set of gardening tools. So gardening, remember, is an important theme of this story, that Mother is like a gardener. She's trying to nurture this plant and she's trying to get it to grow, just like she's trying to do with her family. So she gets a set of gardening tools, and Travis wanted to go and buy his own gift, so he bought her a gardening hat. And so they have this really nice moment laughing at the hat and everything, right? But then at this moment where you think like their dream is finally coming true and you think everything is great, and then Bobo shows up. And Bobo says, well, here's the deal. I don't know where Willie is. And I realized like Willie's gone, man. He's taken all of our money. He's ripped us both off, and then he split. And Walter realizes that he's had his, basically, you think you're fighting to succeed, you're trying to pursue your dreams, and then one of your close friends, somebody who you trust with your life, just drives a knife in your back. And he screams at Bobo, says, man, I trusted you. I put my life in your hands. That money is made out of my father's flesh. And Bobo says, yep, I know. I don't blame me, right? I had my life staked on this deal too, right? So Bobo and Walter both got completely screwed by Willie Harris. And George, not George, I'm saying Walter is so devastated that his dream is completely killed off. And then Mama's reaction, look, she's extremely upset because she starts to realize that the entire amount of $6,500, and this was a lot of money to them, and it's been a lot more money back then than it seems like today. A huge amount of money that he just basically lost. And she gets so upset, and she just starts hitting her son, and she's saying, you're upset with Willie Harris and Bobo? You said he bought that with his own flesh, that money? He earned that money with his own flesh? Well, she said, you don't even know the half of it. I've seen him night after night come in, look at that rug, look at me, the red showing in his eyes, the veins moving in his head. I've seen him grow thin and old before he was 40, working and working and working like somebody's old horse, killing himself, and you give it all away in a day. And she goes to raise her arm to strike him again, and Beneatha is trying to stop her, right? And that's the end of Act 2. So Act 2 ends on a very down note. It seems that the dream has been completely killed off. It seems that the dream is dead. And something dies in all three of the youngers. So in Act 3, let's take a look at the reaction that Mama and Walter and Beneatha have as their dream is dead. And it seems like the only one still fighting to keep it alive at some point is Ruth. Okay. Beneatha starts to talk about her dream being dead, her dream of being a doctor. And she recalls here to Asagai, she talks about how she first developed this dream to be a doctor. She was out sledding around on these hills with ice-covered stone steps. So she called them hills, right? When you live in the city, you just run down the steps. You don't go out to the mountains, right? So she said, and this kid, Rufus, wiped out, hit the sidewalk and saw his face just split open right in front of us. But yet it was like a medical miracle. He's rushed to the hospital. They fixed him and sew him all up. And all you could see is a thin scar in his face, and everything else was fine. And it was such an amazing thing that she said right then that I had a dream that I wanted to fix people, right? To fix what is broken and to take the sick and make them whole again. But now she's so upset that this dream is dead. And she starts screaming to Asagai that there is no progress, that we're all just going around in a big circle going nowhere. But Asagai tries to give her some encouragement. He says, well, first he says, isn't there something wrong in a house, in a world where all dreams, good or bad, must depend on the death of a man? But he says, look, I can see it in my own life that there's been progress. We're not just going in a circle. Yes, sometimes we go forward at a very slow pace. We just take a step forward. Sometimes we even take steps backwards. Sometimes we lurch ahead in very quickly, right? So he says at times it will seem that nothing changes at all. And then again, the sudden dramatic events which make history leap into the future. He says, no, don't give up, right? There is progress. So stop moaning and groaning and tell me what you plan to do. And he says, he reveals to her that he would like to get married and he wants her to move back to Africa with her. And Beneatha is really upset and she just lets Walter have it, right? What, you had all these big dreams of being the chairman of the board. You wanted to have a yacht on Lake Michigan. You thought you were going to be so great. And because of your stupid dream, you just ruined our lives. And so she insults him and says, I look at you and I see the final triumph of stupidity in the world, right? So remember, so now you've got the family members even turning on themselves. So if, the society doesn't support you, their own community doesn't support you, and now their own family members, right? And so mother, again, there she goes to her plant and she tries to nurture it. So she's still trying to figure out a way to keep this plant alive. And she kind of gives up on the dream of the house. She says, look, you know what? Let's just call the moving company, right? We don't have the money. We're not going to go to the house. And people used to always tell me when I was younger, Lena Eggleston, they used to say, you're aiming too high. You need to lower your expectations. You aim high, you're just going to be disappointed. I guess me and Big Walter just never learn, right? And so she's being very defeatist and giving up. But Ruth says, no, right? We need to keep going. We got to get out of this city. We got to get out of this environment. She says, look, it's only $125 a month. We're 4 grown-ups here. We can all work hard. We can pay that. Let's get out. We have to get out of here. And Mom was like, no, we could probably, decorate and clean up this apartment and make it look nice and things. Sometimes you just got to know when to give up some things and hold on to what you got. So now Mom is ready to give up on her dream of ever having a house with a garden. And now we see Walter. So we've seen Beneatha talk about her being at her rock bottom. Then we look at Mama, and she's at rock bottom. And now we get Walter, and we see how he's reached rock bottom. He says, I figured out the way the world works, Mom. There's 2 types of people. There's the takers and the tooken. It's not proper grammar, of course. It'd be the taken. But yeah, the takers and the tooken. People like Willie Harris, they never get tooken, right? Those takers are out there all the time operating, just taking. And I'll have to say one thing for old Willie Harris. He's taught me something. He's taught me to keep my eye on what counts in this world. See, so Walter's just kind of got very cynical. He's saying, look, screw it. If I got to steal, cheat, lie, I'll do whatever I can. I'll just take. I'll be a taker. And I'll get what I can so that I can give my child stuff that they deserve. I should be able to give my wife a string of pearls. She deserves it. I should be able to give that to her, right? So I'm going to go. We'll get Mr. Lindner back here, and I'm going to take. They want to give me a bunch of money. They want to buy me off and tell me to go somewhere else. Screw it. I'm going to go ahead and take their money. And the family is upset by this because they feel that it'd be a huge insult to them and a blow to their pride to lower themselves and accept money, bribe money from a racist community trying to get rid of them. So he says, look, the smartest people are the ones who do the taking. So that's going to be me from now on. But Mama says, I come from 5 generations of people who was slaves and sharecroppers, but ain't nobody in my family never let nobody pay him no money that was a way of telling us we wasn't fit to walk the earth. We ain't never been that poor. We ain't never been that dead inside. And Beneatha says, well, we are dead now. All that talk about dreams and sunlight that goes on in this house, it's all dead now. So as I'm reading the play, I'm getting ready. The first time I was getting ready for just the biggest letdown, the biggest saddest ending of a play. A very, you all this hope for a dream, and it all comes crashing down at the end. But we see here at the moment where everything seems the bleakest. the darkest moment here, where the family seems to be completely dead, something happens, right? When Walter gets to rock bottom, to his lowest point, a spark is lit inside of him and he bursts back into life. So he starts to say this, and I think it's the words. Once he hears it out loud, something affects him. He says, I tell you, I am a man, and I think my wife should wear some pearls in this world. But once he says, I'm a man, it says, this line hangs a good while, and Walter begins to move about the room. The word man has penetrated his consciousness. So just like we saw with Uncle Rock, where the young boy Eric starts to realize that what he thought a real man was not necessarily the case, that he reevaluated it and thought, no, somebody who's kind and loving and supportive like Uncle Rock or just Rock, maybe that's a real man, right? And what's going on here is Walter, something's clicking where maybe he's starting to figure out, what does it mean to truly be a man? And he says here, he mumbles it to himself repeatedly between strange, agitated pauses as he moves about. See, something about the word man is clicking inside of him. And Beneatha says, well, that's not a man. That is nothing but a toothless rat. And I think Walter's starting to think of that same thought. So then Mama says to Beneatha, you should be nicer to your brother. Just because he screwed up, we should not attack each other. I taught you to love him. And she's like, love him? There's nothing left to love. And she says, there's always something left to love. Child, when do you think the time is to love somebody the most? When they done good and made things easy for everybody? Well, then you ain't through learning, because that ain't the time at all. It's when he's at his lowest and can't believe in himself because the world done whipped him so. When you start measuring somebody, measure him right, child. Measure him right. Make sure you done taken into account what hills and valleys he's come through before he got to wherever he is. So show some sympathy, show some compassion. You got to think about what Walter's gone through in his life before you start to judge him, right? When people are at their lowest, that's when we need to love them the most. So we may be at a bottom moment here, but we need to still love each other. Well, something has, at the moment that I thought that Walter was dead, something has sparked back into life. So, as he kept thinking about that word man. And when Mr. Lindner shows up, right, he comes to offer them that bribe, that money to move somewhere else. And Walter looks at him and says, my father. And it says with sudden intensity, my father almost beat a man to death once because this man called him a bad name or something. You know what I mean? No, I'm afraid I don't, Mr. Lindner says. He says, well, what I mean is that we come from people who have a lot of pride. I mean, we are a very proud people. And that's my sister over there, and she's going to be a doctor, and we are very proud. And this is my son, and he makes the 6th generation of our family in this country. And we have decided to move into our house because my father, he earned it for us brick by brick. We don't want to make no trouble for nobody or fight no causes, and we will try to be good neighbors, and that's all we got to say about it. We don't want your money. And what I think here is that this is the moment in which Walter finally becomes a man, right? He steps up and he does the right thing. And he says, I'm going to support my family. We're going to keep going. I'm going to make sure my sister's going to become a doctor. We're going to move out there and we're going to make something out of her life. And we're not going to let you come around here and threaten us and bribe us. And so when he stands up and tells Mr. Lindner to get lost, I think this is the shining moment of Walter. and it shows that his character development is complete. All right, unlike Farrington, who we just kind of leave him just in a terrible moment beating on his son, right? We see Walter pass through that negative, that low time in his life, and he comes out and he reaches his full development as a character. He shows himself to be a true man here. Okay. So we had the exposition, the inciting action event or incident, which is the arrival of the check, the rising action. The turning point or climax was when we find out that Willie Harris has stolen all the money. We have the falling action. And then at the end of this play, we have Walter stand up and defend the family and say, we're going to continue on and pursue our dreams. And so the final part of this is the resolution, the conclusion of the play. We call that sometimes the denouement. And the family is back and they go, let's get the hell out of here. And they all start packing up to leave. And again, as we can expect, there's a moment here where Mama grabs the plant. She looks for her plant. And everybody's trying to basically get packed up and get ready to go. The movers are there. They're all excited. And it says that people were trying to deliberately ignore the nobility of the past moment. I love that term, the nobility of the past moment. Right? And then Mama, Beneatha says, Mama, Asagai asked me to marry him today and to go to Africa. What about George Murchison? Well, I wouldn't marry him if we were Adam and Eve. And so we don't know. It's left in the air. We don't know if Beneatha will move back to Africa. I get a sense that perhaps she won't. I think, but there's all kinds of possibilities for Beneatha. But I like this closing scene between Mama and Ruth, where Mama says, he finally come into his manhood today, didn't he? Kind of like a rainbow after the rain. And Ruth, it says, biting her lip, lest her own pride explode in front of Mama. Yes, Lena. See, so they comment that he finally come into his manhood today. So it's not just me who thought that. It's Mama herself, the character, and Ruth, as they themselves acknowledge that at this moment, Walter had stepped into the role and had become a man. Not one based on power or money or any of those kinds of things, right? But based on sticking up and showing integrity and showing courage and doing what's right, and also thinking for what's best for the other members, not just thinking about his own dream, but thinking about what's best for the people he loves. All right. And the last scene, of course, I love it. We're back to the plant. After all those years, Mama is finally going to achieve her dream. And so I love that the play ends on a very positive and hopeful note. She says, her plant on the table before her. She looks around at all the walls and ceilings, and suddenly, despite herself, while the children call below, a great heaving thing rises in her as she puts her fist to her mouth to stifle it. Take a final desperate look, pulls her coat about her, pats her hat, and goes out. The lights dim down. The door opens and she comes back in, grabs her plant, and goes out for the last time. All right, so that's the play, A Raisin the Sun. I hope you've read it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. It's a fantastic play, so important with so many good themes about the American dream. And remember that for your paper, you're going to be writing about identity, and specifically identity related to what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be a woman. And so there's so much in this play, no matter what you decide, what angle you take for your essay, there's so much that you can use. So that's why I'm making it a requirement that everybody use this work, this play, in essay. And then adding to this, you're going to look at some short stories or even some poems, and you're going to compare and contrast these works of literature as you develop your themes of family and identity.